there's another lawsuit against McDonald's for hot food, and this time it's French fries, which severely burned a 3-year-old girl. Yeah, and people just get very worked up about this, and and I have very mixed feelings about it, just because, I think that food, there's a certain temperature food probably should not be served at.
Yeah.
It's certainly not for children. And I know, we've all been in that situation where the fries have just come out of the boiling oil.
And I love them, honestly. Like when they're fresh like that, it burns my mouth, but I continue to eat them because that's when they're the tastiest, the most delicious.
Ow.
Yeah. But it's hot food. It's hot food and fries specifically. No one likes cold fries. They're delicious when they're hot, but then you get kids involved and, serious injuries. That kind of changes the story a bit. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode, prioritizing profits, dangerous drug and product cases. Another week, another show. Back at it again. How you doing? How's the last 7 days been for you? How you feeling today?
Good. Getting a little bit of a late start. We had hoped to get an early start since I have to wake up at 3:30 in the morning tomorrow. But duty calls. Peter couldn't get the dogs. Had stuff at the hospital that had to happen. So anyway, but all good. I'm revved up.
And so you have to wake up at 3:30 for a flight, right?
Yeah. So heading to Maine by way of Boston. So flying into Boston tomorrow, spending the night there, and then taking a shuttle up to Portland, Maine so tomorrow's Thursday, on Friday, yes. So we get into Portland, Maine on Friday.
And is this a business or pleasure trip?
It is, it's not this kind of business. It's not a law business trip. Primarily pleasure. It's an event called Sober in the City, and it's a really fun event. I've been to several of them, and women get together in various places around the country. The last one was actually in Palm Springs in February, and there's a big dinner party on Saturday night, and some other events during the week. And then, so it is partly business because my friend Terry and I do an online book club, and we will have a table at the event promoting our book club. So see, it's a little businessy.
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't know you guys had a table because I know this, and so for people that might not be familiar with this group, it's essentially a group that you found on Facebook, right? Or is it like a national type thing?
Well, it is national. The woman who started it, Susie Strillman, she's out of Long Beach, California. And now she and Peggy Cooney are partners in this project. Peggy's out of Sacramento. So the initial events were in California, Long Beach, and then Sacramento. But then they travel around the country. And so I'm trying to think. I heard of it. Some friends of mine actually told me about it. And I was supposed to be in Germany when the second one, the first one I went to, was held in Sacramento. But the trip was canceled because Bauer wasn't feeling well. Then he got better, but we had moved that trip. So I was able to go, and then I've been to everyone since.
Since then. So. And how big is this event? Because it's essentially a sobriety thing, right?
Well, it's women who are alcohol-free, who like to have a good time just without the alcohol. And the size of the events vary. I think the Austin one was pretty big. I don't remember, but I think this one is about 75 women. So it's not huge. And it's in a very small town, Portland, Maine. But it was time to do one on the East Coast because the women who, for the East Coast, had to go all the way to either California. The first three were in California, different places in California. And then there was the Austin one. So it was time to do East Coast.
It's interesting, too, that, you mentioned it's women who don't drink but still like to party, and this is an opportunity to be able to have fun and have an event like this without there being alcohol, which really I think it's a point to how ingrained it is into our society, because you can't go to any big event and have there not be alcohol or have that not be some type of,
Right, kind of the focus oftentimes, yeah. Well, and it's also nice, the last one actually was a wine-paired dinner, but it was alcohol-free wine,
de-alcoholized
alcoholized wines.
Yeah.
So there was a a bubbly with appetizer, then there was a white, and then a red. And that was through a brand called Joyous, which a lot of the de-alcoholized wines just taste like crap. I mean, we'll just be honest. It's like, I mean, it's not like the Martinelli's stuff, because that's like super sweet. But some of it just tastes like, boring grape juice. But some of, they are actually, certain vineyards are now de-alcoholizing some of their wine. And so there are some really nice ones. And the Joyous brand was the one that was featured in Palm Springs, and that was very good. I oftentimes buy that now. But there's always like fancy mocktails or AF cocktails. And so this one I don't think is focused as much on the wine, but we'll have to see. There'll be fabulous alcohol-free drinks, and lots of different people are having booths, different groups. A talk on sober sex. There's, all kinds. And of course, they have yoga. I'm not a huge fan of that, but different things along those lines.
And I know we've talked about your book club on the show before, but I didn't know that you guys had gotten a table there. And so this is going to be kind of, like you said, a little bit of business. And is it going to be kind of like recruiting, spreading the word of your guys' kind of group organization, and telling people that they can join if they're interested? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we do some online advertising, but we actually had a table in Palm Springs as well. Anyway, but it's called the Sober Edge Book Club. And we'll have bookmarks, and we're going to have some balloons and some games and prizes and nice. Things along those lines. And we'll be talking about the books that we're reading. And in fact, the book that we are reading this month is called This Side of Alcohol by Peggy Cooney, who happens to be one of the
people that started it. Wow.
Yeah. So she's actually going to be on. We have a monthly Zoom where we all talk about the book, but then we also have a private Facebook group where we post throughout the month. And we have questions to kind of spur on discussions about the book each week. So this one will be fun because the author will actually be live on the Zoom.
Well, that's going to be really cool, too, because at an event like this, obviously people know who Peggy is, and you're going to be able to, talk about that book. I'm sure a lot of her readers are going to be there as well, and they're like, oh, wow, that's really fun, and want to come hang out and talk to other people about that book that have also read it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we can get our copies of the book signed and probably get some pictures with her. I already have some pictures with her, but it's always good to have more. She's a really fabulous lady.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's going to be a lot of fun. 3 a.m. Wake up time for the flight over there.
3:30, I think.
3:30.
Yeah. I know.
So that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah. I'll nap somewhere along the line, maybe at the hotel, and then I'll get in there. I think at like 4:45 their time, which will really be like 1:45 our time. So.
Oh yeah! Wow, that is a long flight.
Well, of course, it's not direct. Although, so I go to Phoenix, and then it's direct from Phoenix. Yeah. I mean, see, you're lucky. I mean, it's really hard to get in and out of Tucson. Nothing is direct, pretty much.
Yeah, but you kind of sign up for that when you move here.
Well, it's true. It's also so easy to get to the airport, though. It's not like it's a 20-minute drive and easy to park. And I know there's pluses and minuses everywhere, I guess.
Yeah. So that sounds like fun, and you'll be back by Tuesday, so we'll still be able to film the next episode and be able to hear about all the crazy partying that's going to take place.
There's some crazy partying. I have to say, I mean, in fact, Friday night, there's Ecstatic Dance is one of the events. And don't even ask, because I don't know. But I will be able to tell you what Ecstatic Dance is. I'm ready to participate.
I feel like there could be a better adjectives than a static dance.
Ecstatic.
Ecstatic, yeah, ecstatic dance. Like, that doesn't excite me. That doesn't sound ecstatic. It's like I would want something like funky dancing or like.
But funky isn't the same as ecstatic. I mean,
ecstatic is like out of control. I'm thinking of just people kind of going wild.
Mm-hmm. Like they're on ecstasy.
Yeah, exactly. Like at a rave where you see people just like moving to the dubstep of the beats and everything, going crazy.
Oh, that may well be what it is.
I honestly, at this point, now that I'm imagining it, I'm hoping so.
Can you imagine your mother doing this?
No, but I can imagine you on the sidelines.
Wait a minute.
I can imagine you on the sidelines enjoying the show and taking videos.
I'm going to be right there in the thick of it. That's all I have to say.
Well, that sounds like a good time. Yeah, awesome. So you got that plan coming up next week, or I guess tomorrow, and then going into next week. And this week has gone pretty well so far as well.
Yeah, this week was great. We actually went to the Sonoyta Rodeo twice.
Wow, double whammy.
It was double whammy. We went Sunday and Monday, which was cool. I mean, it's fun because it's like kind of a small town rodeo. It's not like the huge Tucson rodeo.
More authentic.
Yeah, and it's just not so overwhelming. So that was good, except we went back the second day because we wanted to see the bull riding finals, which is always like the last event because everybody wants to see that. So they don't want people to leave. So that has to be the last event. And it was different. So, I learned some things, but there was an injury. So, yeah. It's a very dangerous sport.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of comes with the territory there.
Yeah, definitely. But I've gone to, probably not that many rodeos, but I always go to the Sonoyta Rodeo, and I've never seen like a serious injury, but this was a pretty serious injury. But the thing was, it wasn't actually the bull rider. So the bull rider came out, and it was a pretty crazy bull, but these bulls are pretty crazy.
It was the jokers that come out. Or
there's a clown. There's a rodeo clown, but then there's also what they call bullfighters. And I didn't realize because somebody was saying that the bullfighter got hurt, and I'm like, well, they're not fighters, they're riders. I mean, bullfighters. I think of like in Spain, with
the matadors.
Exactly, the matadors and ole and all that kind of stuff. But I learned the new terminology. There's the clown, who is also once a person comes off, then you're trying to distract the bull so that they get out of the way and everybody's okay and they round the bull back up. But then there's also bullfighters who are people who aren't dressed like clowns but are still in there trying to distract. And in this situation, he was trying to distract the bull. Did a really good job because the bull came after him, but it like slammed him up against the gates. And ambulance and paramedics and all of this. But we did find out that he had a pretty bad fractured leg, but he was conscious, and able. He was apparently FaceTiming with his family on the while he was on the stretcher. So it sounded like he was going to be okay. Yeah. But pretty dramatic, and that was kind of the end of that.
Did you witness this, or you just?
Yeah, no, we witnessed it.
You saw him get slammed up and everything.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I don't know how I feel about bull riding and the matador thing. I know it's kind of like a big culture thing, and I understand it's a sport, and a lot of people are big fans of it. But I don't know, anything with kind of animals and sport like that, I always think it's a little cruel. And even if there's a lot of situations where maybe it isn't cruel, just in the way, I mean, with having, like, for example, horse racing, right? Like, I know a lot of those horses are treated fantastically, but just in the nature of having a sport revolve around animals, there's going to be that small percentage at least somewhere that isn't as nice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was, I have mixed feelings about it. And I actually was saying to Peter, because we were watching the bronco riding, and so they get on these, kind of wild horses, and then they have, and I won't use the right terminology for that, but it's some sort of cinch under them that is very uncomfortable, which is, making them want to buck it off. Yeah. And I said, I don't like this. I feel like they're really,
they're putting them in discomfort so they can, participate in the sport.
Yeah. And Peter's like, well, they probably don't love it. And I'm like, no, I think
I think it's a little bit more than just like...
I know, he was kind of trying to minimize it. That it was like, well, it's probably a little bit uncomfortable. I'm like, no, it's actually probably not a little bit uncomfortable, because if it was just a little bit uncomfortable, they wouldn't be like bucking like crazy to get it off of them. Yeah. So it has to be a lot uncomfortable. They really want that thing off. So anyway, we have, we don't totally agree on these things. But it does. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. The bulls, I guess, they don't like it either, but I always feel like they've got a better shot at it, and this one definitely won this time, I tell you.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's kind of the nature of the sport, just that the injuries are possible because of how dangerous it is.
Pretty likely. I mean, the other thing we said was that it's actually shocking that people don't get really hurt more often. I mean, you're getting on these just crazy, pissed off, huge animals, and pissing them off, and and then when you fall off.
Yeah, well, I feel like, you got your money's worth then, at least, It's going to be a good show regardless. It's the finals, but wow, did not expect that.
Well, and actually we got in free because thanks to Kim FM, they gave us free passes.
Nice.
Yeah. as advertisers. So
Sounds like a pretty good weekend overall.
It was a busy weekend, huh? Yeah, very busy weekend. Well, and then packing, because I'm a nutcase when it comes to packing, so that's been taking up all my time. But how about you? You had some fun this weekend, Labor Day weekend.
Did a little bit of a staycation. There's this one resort that me and Christina had gone to in the past, and it has a lazy river as well as like a mini golf course that goes not through the hotel, but it's kind of like a water park, right? Where there's a bunch of pools, and then the lazy river goes all the way around, and the mini golf course kind of goes through all of those things.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so we went there and stayed 2 nights, but then ended up getting a third because we were really vibing out, enjoying ourselves, wanted to get the bang for our buck. Spent many hours in the lazy river.
Wow.
First time I haven't been disgustingly sunburned going.
Oh, yeah, you're not sunburned.
Yeah,
Did you put on sun lotion? Actually?
Yes, I put on a lot of sunscreen and reapplied.
Wow, was this kind of at Christina's urging?
Yes,
or did you,
yes. No, having
wondering.
someone kind of help me be responsible with that definitely is a big benefit there. Overall,
thank you, Christina.
Yes. A lot of fun. They have a nice little barbecue place, which is actually pretty solid. They have like slow roasted pork and brisket and all that, so that was good. And got room service and whole shebang. But now
Bruno got to go.
Bruno got to go. Yeah, we were kind of nervous about it because my roommate would watch Bruno, but he's just whenever I leave and I'm gone for a while, I always hear he gets really depressed. He just sleeps all day. Or he sleeps by the couch or sleeps by the door. Doesn't really move around too much. Waiting for me. Yeah, really only gets up to pee or eat, which is kind of how he lives now, but not as depressingly. He's a little happier about getting up to go pee and getting up to go eat.
A little more energetic.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, also, is he thinking you're going away for a holiday weekend, hanging out at a resort, and he's at home?
I don't know. There's this one Family Guy episode that I always wondered if it was the truth, where Brian, Peter dies or something, and Stewie has to go to Brian. It's like, oh yeah, Peter died, and he's like, oh, okay, when is he coming back? He's like, no, he's dead. Yeah, no, he dies every time he leaves to work. Like every time he leaves the house, he's dead. But then he's like he's back alive when he comes back.
So this is a dog, I guess.
It's dog, yeah. Brian and Family Guy, the talking dog.
Oh, I didn't watch Family Guy.
Oh my goodness. Well, he's a talking dog, and he thinks that every time someone leaves the house, that's them dying. But then when they walk back in there, he's like, oh, they're alive. They come back to
so when
life.
somebody really does die, he just thinks that they will still come back.
Well, and I wonder if Bruno, when we leave, or dogs, when we leave, are like, oh, they're dead until they're not.
I don't know. I was worried when we were going on really long trips if they were thinking they've abandoned me. Yeah. But then people say that animals are so in the present moment, and then maybe they don't realize she's been gone for 2 weeks or she's been gone for 3 days. Maybe they're just like, oh, she's not here today. Maybe she'll be here tonight.
Yeah, I think part of that's true. But then you see the clips of Marine veterans or veterans coming back from war, and the dogs getting super excited. So they definitely have to have kind of a sense of time of how long it's been since they've seen. Well,
except that you also see people walking in the door, and the dogs are equally as excited when you've just been gone for 8 hours. So,
that's true.
So I don't know. I mean, when they see this Marine at the airport, I've seen those videos too, and it's very heartwarming, and you're like, oh. But
do they act that way on a day-to-day basis?
Are they like, oh shit, he's been gone 2 years, or they're just like, hey, I haven't seen you since yesterday?
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. Wow, holy heck.
But they definitely remember you, so that's good.
Well, anyways, we should probably get on to the main topic of the show.
Legal.
Yeah.
Something legal.
Good place to start. Updates on cases.
Let's
get into it.
So update, we talked a couple of weeks ago, I think, I don't know when it was, but not too long ago, about some of those nursing pillows and how babies were dying because they were left to sleep on them. And there have been 162 baby deaths.
Jesus.
Yeah, but the horseshoe-shaped pillows, and everybody has them. I mean, if you have a baby, it's on your registry. You've got at least a couple of them.
And so what was happening with the babies, right? They were kind of falling over into the crevice and suffocating, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a variety of ways, but they were being left on them to sleep, and they're very dangerous to sleep on. And so, and the manufacturers were saying, well, there's nothing wrong with these things. They're not meant to be you're not supposed to leave a baby alone on it. It's not supposed to sleep on it. It's supposed to be used while you're nursing, while a parent is there.
Yeah.
And so, but because there's been so much in the news about it and so many deaths, the CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission, has recommended the first federal requirements to make them safer and to discourage people from leaving babies on them. And so that involves a couple of things. They want them to be made more firm because they're kind of squishy now.
Yeah.
So they want it to be more firm so they're not as appealing to lie a baby on. And also,
they're not as appealing to put a baby on.
well, if it's not something soft and squishy, like, lay a baby on a board. I mean,
Well, exactly. But that's kind of a selling point too, is you want to give them something that you're like, oh, the baby will be comfortable now.
Well, but that's just, you don't want the baby to be comfortable. This is to make this is supposed to be for the parent to be more comfortable holding the baby in a certain position.
Oh, so it's
while
not
they
even
nurse.
for the baby to be comfortable. It's for the parent to kind of be able to.
Well, yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be uncomfortable while they're nursing, presumably, but it can't be so comfortable that you want.
Plank of wood that's right underneath the arm.
I mean, they can make it out of not even material, but but they don't want it to be so cushy that you just leave a baby in it to sleep like it's a pillow.
Yeah,
right.
It does look very comfy.
It does look comfy, and you can just fit your head.
I would
head
pass
in there.
out in minutes.
You did. I had them.
Yeah, here I am.
Luckily, I did. I don't know if I ever left you alone on them. I mean, it wasn't something that I was aware of, and clearly, if I did, you survived.
Yeah.
Survived the pillow. But so they want to make them really firm so that they're not tempting that way, and then also that U-shaped thing wide enough that a baby wouldn't kind of get trapped in that U-shaped opening there.
Yeah.
So and then also they want to have bigger warning labels on them that can't be taken off, so that every time you pick up the damn thing, it says, "Don't leave your baby on this."
Yeah.
I mean, probably wouldn't technically say that, but anyway, so they are looking at whether they are going to adopt these regulations, and then all of these will have to comply with that. And of course, I'm sure that the industry, there are going to be people arguing about it, and of course, the argument that they've made in the past is just, these things, if you use them as you're supposed to use them, they're not dangerous.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, just gut. You see this soft, cozy thing. They fall asleep while they're nursing. You just set them down on
Yeah.
it. I mean, you can see how people do
Well,
that.
and that's the thing, is that it goes back to, is it reasonable to assume someone would use it this way?
I think that's I think that's probably how everybody uses them.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, there's a lot of babies that have died. 162 that we know of. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of these things out there. There's like over 1.3 million of them floating around out there, or actually that they're sold annually. What am I saying? 1.3 million every year. So who knows how many million are out there?
And it's all different brands, right? Because I'm assuming.
They're all multiple brands. Yeah.
But it's this type of product in general that is going to be getting these.
Yeah, the nursing, those horseshoe-shaped nursing pillows. And I'm sure, well, I wouldn't just say horseshoe-shaped, but any of the nursing pillows will have to comply with these standards.
Yeah.
So they are going to get some feedback and then just determine whether they will institute these rules. And they're saying that a decision will probably likely come out in the next month or so.
Wow.
So we'll definitely update on that. And we have talked about these in the past, and certainly anybody who has these, just certainly be careful. I mean, yikes.
And what was the entity that's bringing up these issues, or like forcing these new
well, the
requirements?
Consumer Product Safety Commission
Okay.
has raised this issue, and it came. There were a bunch of news stories recently when the numbers came out about just how many deaths there had been and how dangerous these were, and that I think kind of spurred them on to say, hey, maybe we need to set some regulations on these, and so we'll see in the next month or so if they're going to do that.
That's good that they've recognized that it's a problem and taking active steps to fix it and prevent it from happening again. And it seems like they're going pretty fast with it. I mean, within a month that they're getting kind of this.
It wasn't that long ago that I mean, but I mean, there have been reports in the past.
Yeah.
But then there was a big news story when they came up, realized just how many recently. But I mean, it's just, with that many of them out there, when you think about it, 1.3 a year. And then a lot of these are, again, reused, given to people, resold, all of that. They're out there.
Yeah. And children, especially babies, are kind of obviously a sore point in just society in general. That's why I like Dare was so big. It was protect our children. Our children are being poisoned, right?
They have to get old enough to be poisoned.
Yeah. And with this, so it kind of makes sense that they're moving a little bit faster than usual, it seems, with this specifically. It's always crazy to me, and I don't have that much experience with babies, but I never really fully realized just how, like, incapable they are at, like, such a young...
yeah. I mean, they can't pick their heads up. If you set them down and their nose or mouth are covered, they can't move their neck to pick it up.
Or if they just, like, roll over, like, something like that, they just can't do anything. That's insane. I mean, I just never really thought of it that way, but yeah, they are just kind of defenseless.
Yeah, human babies. I mean, when you think about it, and then you look at, like, some of these animals. I mean, like, the giraffe, it, like, plops out, you know, and
and it gets running
in the
right away.
Serengeti, it stands up and it walks over and starts eating grass.
Like just any other day, right back to business.
But most animals, they could at least walk and run and that sort of escape right after they're born. But yeah, definitely not human babies.
Babies are just defenseless, just balls of meat and roll around. And well, that's good that actions are being taken and they're pushing forward. They're pushing forward quicker than usual.
Yeah.
What other types of updates have we?
Well, one other update. So the Boy Scout sex abuse cases, that was a bankruptcy case, and those were the bankruptcy filing date has long since passed, but there was a lot of delay in basically getting the bankruptcy approved and starting the process whereby the claimants would get paid. So finally now the portal is open for inputting additional information for the claimants, although there's no indication as far as when the payments are going to start. And I'd like to next week maybe get into a little bit more detail on that, because that could be a whole topic, really. Although it's not something, again, it's not something that somebody can come and make a claim now. These claims had to be made back in 2019 and 2020. And so at this point, they're just distributing amongst the claimants who have already submitted claims. But it was a big delay, very frustrating for a lot of people. But at least, the good news is it's finally moving, and hopefully we will see payments, in the not too distant future. And I did notice also, it was kind of interesting timing on this, that Netflix has a documentary coming out, I think it's today or tomorrow, called Scouts Honor. And it's a documentary specifically about the sex abuse cases within the Boy Scouts, and how there was a lot of knowledge about what was going on, and these troop leaders were just moved, to other states and other councils, and how really this abuse was pretty rampant and should have been stopped a long time ago. So I have not obviously seen it yet, but just the trailer kind of brings tears to your eyes. I mean, it's and from just talking to clients, we do represent a number of people in this litigation. The stories were just devastating. Yeah, really devastating.
And it's just so shocking too, because when I was growing up, Boy Scouts was just so big. It was pretty cool. Kids would come in their full uniforms when they had
badges,
their badges and everything. And I'd be like, holy shit, this guy's a badass. This guy's a badass. But to hear, obviously all this entire situation as a whole it's awful. And one good thing about Netflix is I think they do a really good job of creating documentaries and series about these type of topics to bring light to it. Because, I think a lot of people wouldn't have heard about this and wouldn't have found out about it unless they were in Boy Scouts, or if they were in some, similar type of organization and then they just so happened to see it online or something like that. But there's a lot of people that just aren't familiar with that type of stuff at all. And so, shows and organizations like Netflix putting this out, it's good. I think it brings a lot of light to the problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely interested in watching it. It'll be a really hard thing to watch. Yeah. But I think important, and, and obviously obviously just having been involved in this, it's pretty personal to me. So.
And so when you mentioned that we don't know when the claimants will start getting their payouts.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. This has taken a lot longer than anybody thought it would originally, but there was a lot of objections to the settlement and just a lot of moving parts because it was not just the BSA, the Boy Scouts of America itself, but there were also like the local councils, and there were a variety of insurance companies. Some of the churches were sponsors, and would have the meetings at their churches. So there were all kinds of other parties that were involved. And then just like what the Boy Scouts had, because so when they filed bankruptcy, they liquidate their assets. But their assets, a lot of these were property, were, these huge, places where they were camping. And a lot of these were donated to them. And then there's like restrictions on land donations.
Yeah.
And so, can you liquidate them? Can you not? There was like tons of like Norman Rockwell artwork. I mean, just, all kinds of crazy things that had to be valued and liquidated. But the insurance companies fought a lot about whether and how much they should have to pay. So it was a lot messier than I think people thought going into it. So it's taken a really long time. And there's 82,000 claimants.
Wow.
And so this is the other thing too. It's a huge number, but I will tell you that there have to be just probably 100 times that because this is not the kind of thing where people come forward.
I was going to say 82,000. I mean, that's a large number, but compared to how big Boy Scouts have been and how long it's been ongoing, I mean, it's like tens of millions of kids have gone through that system. And with something like this, where it seems very systematical, this issue, and how, like you said, troop leaders were just kind of pushed around to different areas, and the issue wasn't really dealt with.
And repeat offenders.
Yeah, with all that in mind, 82,000 does sound a little bit low.
Well, we know it's low because, first of all, in any kind of sex abuse case, oftentimes it doesn't get reported. But male on male, of all things, rarely gets reported. And then this has also been going on, for so many years. I mean, I have clients that are in their 70s and people who have passed away, people who have committed suicide. I mean, there's just an unbelievable, I guess what I'm saying is that if 82,000 people were willing to come forward and speak to somebody about this, that is just a drop in the bucket.
Tip of the iceberg there.
Absolutely, because this is not an easy thing. It is really not an easy thing to come forward and report. And these are people that they respected, that they looked up to, oftentimes parent figures. And it was very confusing, I mean, for a lot of them. So it was a huge, huge issue. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Netflix addresses it.
Yeah. And then, so with the payout to the claimants, I know you mentioned, we don't know how long it is. Is that something where if you are a claimant, you just kind of have to wait and see, and they'll say something when that time comes, or, they'll announce something?
No, there's a whole process, and we've already discussed this with the clients, and there is a tiering system. There are different categories where they say this was what we think the value of the claim is, with some mitigating or aggravating factors, but we know that there's not enough money to pay the full value of all of the claims. Yeah. So what they have to do is they have to get all 82,000 in, figure out the value of all of the claims combined, and then take that to the pot of money, the settlement trust fund, and divide that and say, okay, now what percentage does everybody get? And maybe everybody gets 10% of the value of their claim. Maybe they get 5%. Maybe they get 25%. So until they look at every one of the 82,000 claims, nobody can know.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last week too. So it's as fair as it can get, right? So it's if there's only a certain amount of money in the pot, it's not going to be first come, first serve. Obviously, that'd be insane.
Oh, right. No, yeah. No, I think we talked about that in another context. But the same thing.
Exactly.
I mean, they have to figure out the full value of all of the cases, and then how much money, based on the amount of money we have, what percentage can we pay people? And so it may be a very small percentage of the value of their claims, but until they look at them, they don't know, how many of the claims are, very severe or less severe, that, they don't know. And so, evaluating 82,000 claims is going to take a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder what the process is like that on the back end. I mean, already this is such an awful topic, but 82,000 claims, and you have to go through them, and you have to categorize them and go through all of the details and then put dollar amounts and percentages to everything. I mean, the amount of time that must take, but also the manpower and kind of like the emotional energy.
Exactly. I was going to say, and just there were some where, in fact, I can remember we were on a trip when the deadline was coming up. Peter and I were in Sedona, and I was doing some final calls. People had called kind of close to the deadline on the phone and going through that and getting the cases filed or the claims filed. And I mean, I remember one time I came in, I was actually sitting outside, and I came in, and and he was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I said, "No, I need you to hug me right now. This is, it was," and I'm just getting chills thinking about it. So the people who are actually going to have to be doing this full time, day after day after day, reading these stories, I cannot imagine. And now there's a company that's been hired to do this, and they are going through specialized training. And the trustee was on a call the other evening, specifically saying that it was a company that already had like trauma-informed training.
Yeah.
But they were also going to get some additional training specific to this case. But yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine. Just, one story a day was pretty devastating, or a couple, where there was a period of weeks where we were talking maybe to 2 or 3 people a day, each of us. But still, I can't, I don't know, it would be hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, it needs to happen, and people need to know about this, and they need to be compensated to the best that they can, and at least recognized, and part of what. And actually, I guess we won't talk about this next week because we really just dove right in here. Yeah. But part of the settlement, and what was so important to many of the claimants, is that the Boy Scouts, not only are they going to pay what they can pay everything they have, but they are changing their policies, and they are they're putting a whole process to really protect boys going forward in the system, and ensure that this kind of thing never happens again.
Yeah.
And that's really what I can tell you that a lot of my clients said was, I don't ever want anybody else to go through what I went through. Yeah. And so by coming forward and telling their stories and taking a stand, that helps. And so that was a big thing for some of them. Just, what I know I might not get much money, and no amount of money is going to change what happened to me, but I do want to come forward and say this did happen to me, and this can't happen to others. So I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it must be, and for something like this where it is kind of a systematic issue, and there needs to be these barriers and these rules put in place to prevent it from happening. None of those can come to be without someone speaking up, and without a large portion of people speaking up and going through that kind of difficult experience of doing that, to speaking up and reaching out to someone, because that's massive. And it's so crazy to me that something like this can exist for so long and continue, and with the troop leaders being moved around, it almost reminds me of like
the Catholic Church, the diocese, and
well, even like also cops, where it's like they do something bad, and obviously it's a completely different area, but they do something bad and they go on a paid suspension and they get moved to another department in another state or another town or something like that.
I mean, that kind of thing can certainly happen, I think, in any industry.
In any industry,
kind of
but
I guess.
And then also just how many donors there were, like the fact that the church was involved, and I wonder how deep this really goes, because only so much. I'm sure, like you said, with even the victims, it's a tip of the iceberg. I'm assuming with like the amount of issues and knowledge, people that had knowledge and kind of pushed it under the rug, that's also probably just a tip of the iceberg of that level.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Well, that's good that they are doing things to prevent it from ever happening again. I know the Boy Scout organization, it's not a bad organization. I know that
there's great things about
Yeah,
it. There's
yeah.
absolutely great things about it. And it's a lifeline for some kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
It's I know, even with like some of my friends back in the day, like I said, like it was it was their proudest
Yeah.
thing, right?
I mean, it's
it
like
was,
very structure
Yeah.
and I mean, it's so the Boy Scouts is going forward, and with some big changes in place. So that's, I guess, a positive.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, appreciate the update on that. I mean, I think that's a really important topic, and hopefully we'll just kind of continue to get updates, and hopefully the claimants will get their payout sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll watch the documentary and see what you think about it next week.
Yeah, we can discuss it
Homework.
on
You have
the podcast.
homework.
I am interested to see it because this is a case that you've talked to me about a decent amount, and to see it kind of more in detail and kind of, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of sides to it that I haven't heard quite yet. Going on, though, cases that we are currently handling.
Okay. Well, so the general category that we're going to talk about is medical malpractice, but we're going to talk about kind of a specific situation and a very narrow area of it because it's just a huge topic that we could probably talk show after show on. But the way that this came up is that actually a colleague of Peter's reached out to me, and because he knows I'm an attorney and I handle a lot of like device cases and that sort of thing, medical malpractice as well. And he was telling me about a situation, and it really reminded me a lot of the leg saver cases that we were talking about with those arthrectomies, where they were doing, the doctors were doing just multiple procedures on somebody that had little, if any, benefit, and telling them that, hey, if you don't do this procedure, you might lose your leg. And then they were ultimately having amputations, losing their leg because of the problems with these procedures. But it was a money-making situation, and the drug companies were making a lot of money, and the doctors were making a ton of money because these were cases that they were procedures that could happen outside of the hospital setting.
So they're opening up their own practices just to do those procedures. Exactly.
So it's a little bit different, but it really reminded me of that. So what he was, and he had just recently published an article about it. And so this is a situation, cardiology, of course, because that's that's what Peter does and that's what we know. But it's a procedure that we used to call it angioplasty with stenting, but the official term is PCI of CTO, which is percutaneous coronary intervention of chronic total occlusion.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, right. Seriously doubt it. But so basically what it is it's where an artery, so you know that your arteries can get blocked, and people go in and they will clear them out or they'll put stents in, right? They open them up. So it can be a partial blockage. And you go out and you've got that plaque and you remove it. Yeah. But then there can also be a total blockage. And this is an issue where somebody wants to go in and open up a total blockage. The problem with that is that it's super risky and it's questionably beneficial because once it's been blocked, and especially if it's chronic, so say more than 3 months, the tissue on the other side is probably already dead. Okay. Now there are exceptions where they can have what they call collateral. Like somehow the blood still gets around. They open up collateral arteries, and so the tissue doesn't fully die. Which kind of then makes it unnecessary.
Well, and can I ask real quick too, is I've heard of this, right? Like stents in arteries and whatnot. But when I imagine veins and arteries, they're tiny, like tiny things. Like how are you actually able to open up a vein or an artery and put stents in it? I mean, isn't it?
Well, it's the same thing like with those arthrectomies where you're putting, you're going in there, with like the little lasers and the little knives and you're not cutting through them. I mean, you're going like up in through your artery through like, actually, I don't know exactly, but I know that we'll have to get Peter on here. But I mean, you can go up like through your femoral artery and then get into the other veins from there. So it's with a catheter. It's not, you're not cutting in, you're going in like with a catheter.
Oh, okay. So because I was also going to ask, if you're going into the artery to clear up that blockage, in my head it was, you cut it open and you start
No,
cleaning
you're
it
sending,
out.
yeah, you're sending like a catheter up in there. So
Yeah.
very similar to those arthrectomy situations. And then you're clearing it out. But then to try to go in and actually fully open it is super, super risky.
Sounds serious. I mean, and I'm assuming, with arteries being total blockage, like you could lose limbs, right? I mean, if
So sometimes people don't even have symptoms, but they, or they're going in for an angiogram and they actually just kind of find this. They find some other areas, maybe partial blockages, which you're going to, you can open those with the stent. But then this other situation wouldn't even necessarily need any treatment. Probably, may not be causing any problem. And yet you see it's something that could be fixed.
Yeah.
And so the doctor's like, hey, you've got this total blockage, we need to open it up. The problem is that they're not saying, well, maybe they are, but what they should be saying to the patient is, here's the risks, including death, okay, of this procedure, and then here's the benefits. And the problem is that the benefits are probably negligible.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually, let me see, and this was something Peter had brought up too. So the American College of Cardiology classifies procedures in different ways. And they have let's see how it goes. Classified as, class 1, class 2, class 3, and then there's like A and Bs. So this one is classified as a 2B procedure. And so
how do the levels work here?
So what 2B means is, so class 1 is going to be, the benefit is much better, much greater than the risk. Then class 2 is moderate, class 3 is weak. And so the class 2B, the way that they explain it is the recommendation is weak. And it says it may or might be reasonable, and the usefulness, effectiveness is unknown, unclear, uncertain, or not well established.
Why are you even allowed to do it
Right?
then?
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells you, okay, here's this procedure we think you should have, it might kill you.
Yeah.
And it might be reasonable to do it. The usefulness or effectiveness is unknown, unclear. You're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's is just crazy to me. And I think that what happens is, or kind of the area of medical malpractice this goes to is informed consent. Mm-hmm. So, a patient has to have informed consent to undergo a procedure. And so they have to understand the risks and the benefits. And I just cannot believe that, 600,000 patients are being told this.
Yeah.
And still agreeing to it.
So is that the idea? Is that they aren't being told that the benefits
I don't think they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be in fine print on whatever they sign,
Yeah.
but I think the doctors are telling them we recommend that you do this, and it's a closed artery, and we can open it up, and that it's going to help you. I can't imagine that. I just can't imagine somebody is agreeing to it if they're not being told that it's going to help them.
And could it be also that some of these doctors just disagree with that? Like in their mind, from what they've seen, that they have seen a lot of benefit, or that they do think it would be really good, and that's what they tell.
Yeah, they can, but that we go back to the American College of Cardiology is the one that classified this. So sure, they can say, well, in my experience, I've helped all these people, but did you really help them?
It's unknown.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was pretty outraged to hear about that. And yeah, he said that a lot of, the conferences and conventions he goes to, these doctors are up there talking about doing this procedure, and it's very frustrating to him because he's like, hey, what are you doing? How is it, how are you helping these people, and you're putting them at risk? Mm-hmm. So I thought it was kind of interesting, and certainly if somebody had undergone a procedure with a bad outcome, and they didn't know this, that would be a good legal case.
Yeah.
And the sad thing too is that, like with that New York Times article, until either reporters start investigating and reporting about this, until there's lawsuits and it gets in the news and doctors get basically punished financially, the insurance companies get involved. Until that happens, things don't change.
Yeah.
And so I think that was partly why he had kind of reached out to me. I don't have any clients who've come to me before this telling me they had this problem, but it was something I wanted to research. We put a blog out on it, and certainly if somebody has undergone this procedure, they should get in touch with an attorney. You would need an attorney in the state that you reside in. However, we could certainly help you find somebody if you're not in Arizona and you've had this situation. And again, not just this one. Not just this particular procedure. I mean, this is one that we know is high risk and low benefit. But, if you've had a procedure and you've had a bad outcome, how much information did you have? I mean, were you given adequate information to make a good decision? And I think that, like in those other cases in that article, those patients were not given accurate information.
Yeah.
And so it may be after the fact. And that kind of goes to... I've got a rant about this, but so you go through this heart procedure, you have a bad outcome, or your loved one dies, and the doctor's like, well, that was a risk of the procedure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's always a risk of the procedure, but you didn't know that the benefits weren't there, or
it might have not been necessary in the first place.
That maybe you shouldn't. Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't have even been in there in the first place. It was a potentially unnecessary surgery, and so a lot of people are just like, oh, okay. We knew that was a possibility, but maybe it shouldn't have happened.
And you can only pursue this as a case if there was a negative outcome or some type of harmful effect from getting that surgery. You can't pursue it if there wasn't nothing, because in my mind, I would be pissed just knowing that, I was either lied to or misinformed or information was left out. I was told that this would be something really important, that I needed to get it done, or that it would help a lot, when actually there's no proof that it would help. There's no proof that, it would improve my condition at all. And, maybe they had to take weeks off of work. Maybe they were bedridden for a week or 2 weeks, and maybe they had to miss life family events, right? So those have value in my mind.
There is value. And technically you still do have if you underwent an unnecessary surgery, I mean, you had financial costs, you had pain and suffering going through it, you had time off work, all of those things. Yeah. So you do have a case. And it just depends on, again, medical malpractice cases are very expensive to prosecute. And so oftentimes I've had people who have come and said, here's the situation. I'm like, yes, that should not have happened to you. However, and luckily they're there talking to me, and so the end result was not too horrendous. We look at what it's going to cost to litigate the case versus what they can potentially recover. And there are some situations where it's going to cost as much or more than the value of the case. Wow. And so that would not be the ideal route. And an attorney cannot do that. They're going to lose money in addition to their time. Yeah.
Why is it so expensive? Is it because these doctors are being represented by, hospital councils and things along those lines? Or?
Well, partially, but the issue is that in a medical malpractice case, you have to hire an expert witness to say that what was done wrong. And expert witnesses do not come cheap. And so you're going to pay for them to evaluate the case. You're going to pay for them to testify in deposition. You're going to have to depose the other side's witnesses. It's just it is a very expensive process. So sometimes a lawsuit, again, if you had a horrendous injury, absolutely that makes sense.
Yeah.
The value of your case is significantly more than what it's going to cost. But if you had a relatively good outcome, it may not make sense financially. But I always tell people, that's not the only route. They can make a complaint against the doctor with their board of medical examiners. Yeah. There are other things that you can do if something has happened and a lawsuit isn't the right route. And so, in reality, you get a lot of medical malpractice calls, and very few of them. Well, first of all, very few of them are viable cases because not every bad outcome means that a doctor was negligent. And then even if it looks like the doctor potentially was negligent, then are the damages sufficient to justify the case?
Yeah.
So it's a complicated area. I mean, and yeah, it's a tough area.
It definitely sounds like a tough area, and it makes even more sense in those situations to reach out, even if you've only just gotten, like you had the procedure, but you weren't sure if there's any negative effects, or the negative effects that you had, you weren't sure if they will be reasonable enough or large enough for it to make sense to pursue a case like this. But that's why it makes sense to reach out to a lawyer, because then they can kind of make that give you their opinion on it.
Right. I mean, I think it always makes sense to reach out if you feel like something was wrong. Sometimes it turns out that it wasn't. In fact, just recently, there was an inquiry on one of the listservs I'm on, and it was a situation involving an ICD, a pacemaker, and that's exactly something that Peter does. And so he looked at the records and evaluated the case and said, hey, here's exactly what happened. Here's how the pacemaker was set. It did not malfunction. There wasn't malpractice. And he is very honest. He'll say yes or no. But he looked at that and he said, no, it was a very unfortunate thing, but nothing was done wrong by the doctor, and the device didn't malfunction. And so he could let that attorney know that that wasn't a good case for them to pursue. And then also, the family, hopefully they're relieved, because they say, okay, this really couldn't have come out differently. It's not that somebody screwed up. This just happened, and it can be a bit of a comfort to know that.
Yeah.
Because again, if you find out that you have a medical malpractice case, it's devastating. I mean, yes, maybe you get money in the end, but you know that your loved one shouldn't have died.
And someone's specifically responsible for it.
Yeah, I mean, it must be a terrible feeling. I mean, I haven't personally experienced that, but it's almost like the being told that nothing went wrong might be more comforting. So anyway, so for that reason, again, hey, if you think that something, if you have a question, if you just don't know, I mean, it's worth finding out.
And I'm surprised this isn't getting more attention just in the medical community as a whole, because with how often this case is, or not this case, but this surgery is being done, and how clearly it's said that it's unknown if it actually has any benefits, I feel like people would look at that and be like, okay, what? Obviously, this doesn't make sense. Obviously, something's wrong here. Yeah.
Well, so that's the thing, is there are, and just I knew the one doctor who had just published a study on it, or sorry, an article on it, and so then I just Googled, and there are multiple other people who have written about this problem, saying that it's questionable. And so actually we'll throw those up. Those were in the blog, the links to 3 of the studies I just pulled. There are more. But again, there are a number of publications that are addressing this issue. So it's known. And again, the more of these publications saying that this procedure is very risky and potentially not so beneficial, the stronger a case you're going to have. It's going to make it a lot clearer, a lot easier to pursue.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. I think these medical malpractice cases are really interesting, because it's something where, doctors, they're an authoritative figure. They're a trusted member of community. They're looked up upon and praised in a lot of
gods in some cultures, and they think they're gods. Some of them, not all of them.
Yeah, and then to have a case like this where some of them are knowingly doing something that they know isn't in the best interest of their patient, and maybe it's an ego boost, and it sounds like from those conventions almost like flexing on other doctors about, look how good I am. Yeah, it's shocking, and I think it kind of disrupts what people's perception and reality of like not what doctors are, but not everything is as clear cut and as safe and as trustworthy as we would like it to be.
Yeah. I mean, they're only human, doctors, and that's kind of it's scary.
Yeah. Well, we are kind of coming close to an end on this show. I know last week we kind of hinted about going into a McDonald's topic, and we also do have a question.
Yeah.
Was there one that you wanted to specifically touch on?
Well, we can talk about the McDonald's briefly, at least.
Yeah.
Because there's another lawsuit against McDonald's for hot food, and this time it's French fries, which severely burned a 3-year-old girl. Yeah, and and people just get very worked up about this, and and I have very mixed feelings about it, just because, I think that food, there's a certain temperature food probably should not be served at.
Yeah.
It's certainly not for children. And I know, we've all been in that situation where the fries have just come out of the boiling oil.
And I love them, honestly. Like when they're fresh like that, it burns my mouth, but I continue to eat them because that's when they're the tastiest, the most delicious.
Ow.
Yeah. But it's hot food. It's hot food and fries specifically. No one likes cold fries. They're delicious when they're hot, but then you get kids involved and serious injuries. That kind of changes the story a bit.
Yeah. So this one, it's just filed, so we don't know. It's not like there's been a verdict or anything, but disfiguring scars again and requiring surgery. So obviously these were really, really hot French fries. And the situation. I've gone through drive-thrus, and I recall times where I was handed French fries and being told, "Oh, be careful, they just came out."
Yeah.
And so maybe that should happen. That if it is something where they've just came out and they haven't just been sitting under those heat lamps, that you do tell people, should you not serve them right away? Should you wait until they cool down?
Yeah.
Then are you going to have a big line at the drive-thru and people are pissed off because fast food isn't fast?
And then it's just not as good at times.
There's probably like a perfect sweet spot for French fries where they're not cold and they're not going to require surgery.
Yeah. Well, and so did this kid get handed the McDonald's fries and then it just spill all over her lap in this car seat? Or I'm assuming that was the situation because, like I said, eating a single fry sometimes when they're incredibly hot burn the shit out of my mouth. I can't imagine a full bucket of fries falling on me.
Yeah. So the complaint says that the food was handed to the mother, and she passed the food to her daughter in the back seat. And then seconds later, she heard the screaming, and the fries had fallen onto her thighs. So.
I just, and this going back, I know that there's that chicken nugget case, and that got settled, and it was, I think,
it was a verdict for $800,000.
$800,000. But I guess if I was in the parent situation, I understand kind of just handing food back to the kid. But someone 3 years old, toddler in a car seat, food's hot. It's not even just McDonald's. Like food is just hot. That's just how it is, especially coming out of fast food and drive-through. That in itself seems a little irresponsible. I know with how much the damages are. Like with the previous case with the chicken nuggets, obviously there's levels to heat, but at the same time, like it's not that much damage. It can just be, normal burning, that normal hot food at correct levels.
That probably happens all the time.
Well, exactly.
But if you don't have to have surgery, you usually don't sue.
True. But.
Yeah. Well, and I agree because again, I think it's clear that the employees should not be handing it directly to the kid.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if something has just come out, and it's just blasting hot, that you should tell the person you're giving it to, whether they're an adult or they're going to pass it on to the kid. But then I do think that, before a parent gives it to the child, maybe touch it.
Put some second thought. My dad always ate like half my food, and he said he was making sure it wasn't poisoned.
Didn't want you to burn. Wait till it cooled off.
Yeah. It probably took a few more bites than it should have, but you would at least test it.
To be extra safe,
exactly.
Extra sure that you were okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be another big hot topic. Pardon the pun. But people, get really pissed off about this and feeling like people shouldn't sue over hot food. And it's tough. It's tough. And again, the only cases that people are bringing, except for the hot coffee one, which was so severe.
Yeah.
And that had a lot of other elements in it as well. But I guess I think I was always pretty careful about what
on the hot coffee topic. I was watching Suits. I think it was literally last night, and they referenced that.
Oh,
One of the attorneys was like, someone sued McDonald's for the coffee being too hot, and as a little pun, not a pun, like a little joke, in the middle of a conversation. I was like, well, it's a little bit more than that. A little bit more.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like a whole part of our culture now.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, that gets people hot on both sides.
Yeah.
Again,
You're just on fire with these.
All right. Well, anyway, moving on, maybe just a quick addressing of the question that we've had all week long, or 2 weeks now. I think last week we talked about people saying, why can't I get involved in the 3M earplug lawsuit or settlement, because you didn't file a case back when the deadline was. And then we've just had call after call, poor Danny, about this. I mean, and she's being very kind to people and explaining the situation. But the question that came up today was, well, why wasn't I told about this before when I could file the lawsuit? And I don't know why this person hadn't heard about it. When these cases came out, the advertising was just crazy. And it was one of the first big ones before the Camp Lejeune, because that's kind of the latest one, where attorneys got a really hard time for how much advertising they were doing. I mean, and I could not turn on the TV, I couldn't turn on the radio, I couldn't open my Facebook, Instagram without seeing these ads.
See, and that's interesting because I didn't see it at all. And I don't see any Camp Lejeune because I think obviously advertising in general is very targeted, but also our current generation doesn't watch cable TV. And I think that's where a lot of lawyers advertise. And obviously most of them probably do some internet and some radio, but even radio, I don't listen to the radio.
There's a lot of the OTT, the streaming stuff. I mean, that's on a lot of, those services. And then anybody who set foot on a naval or a military base was getting contacted with, it was just blasting everywhere. Yeah. It was almost offensive. But yeah, I think that you wouldn't be the target audience, certainly the age range. But that being said, it can be a problem. But it goes back to always people who rant and rave and say that they hate attorney advertising. And I always say, you know what, for the types of cases that we do, for mass tort cases, if we don't advertise, nobody will know that they have a case.
Yeah.
Everybody knows if they get hit by a car, they can contact a lawyer. Yeah. But people don't know that this drug is a problem now, or that product has even been recalled. I mean, it's part of the reason we do this podcast. People don't know this stuff. So what I would say is, if you have any injury, I mean, maybe you didn't see an ad, but why not Google it? Mm-hmm. Why not check with, Consumer Product Safety? Why not just Google, are there lawsuits about this?
It'll come up somewhere. Someone's advertising, someone's talking about it.
But maybe it's not. I mean, maybe somebody, this knee is a problem for them. They haven't heard a TV commercial. They Google it. Maybe that knee, there's nothing wrong with that knee. Yeah. Maybe it was malpractice. Maybe it was just sometimes, there are bad outcomes for no particular reason. But, certainly with Google these days, you could do some research on your own. We have a lot of calls. I mean, because I advertise so much here locally, I kind of got the reputation for being the person to contact on drug and device cases. So we get calls all the times on things, and Daniel, have you ever heard of anything with this? No, I haven't. Let me research. Let me reach out to other attorneys I know. Okay, no, there's no recall. We are happy to research it. Yeah. You can also research it on your own. And of course, there are lots of attorney advertising, but don't be so mad about the attorney advertising and then complain that they didn't advertise enough.
It's probably two different people, but
what? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably somebody who was complaining.
That makes sense. And maybe I think that's a good topic as well on our next show, or down the line, is how do cases kind of get started? Because I would imagine the first person that has an issue with hernia mesh, the first few people that started having issues and realizing, wow, this is connected, or shouldn't be happening. There wasn't anything. There wasn't advertising. Like, a case always has to start somewhere. There
have to be enough problems before people start seeing that there's a problem. Enough complaints, enough adverse events that then it's like, wait a minute, there's too many problems with this. Maybe there's a problem with that product.
Yeah.
So.
Alrighty. Well, that is. It's related to kind of what's been going on a lot in the last 2 weeks. Like you said, we've been getting a lot of calls about the 3M.
Yeah, and it's very sad. It is. I mean, it is sad. But yeah, I won't go back on. It's sad. It's unfortunate. But if you do, and if there is a situation where you do qualify, don't put it off. Don't wait.
Yeah, because then we get into situations like this where everyone's getting their payments and you got to sit out for it. Well, I think that will probably come to a close here on this one. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. I'm excited to hear about Maine. I'm excited to hear about the book club and meeting the author of the current book that you guys are reading. And thank you everyone for tuning in with us, hanging out. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to throw them in the comment section on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, wherever it is. We love hanging out with you guys. We love answering questions. And if there's a question or a concern or even a story that you want us to kind of talk about and share with other people, and you don't feel like put it in the comments, feel free to email us, podcast@showeredlaw.com. And we're happy to talk about it, spread the word. That's really what this podcast is all about, is to spread the word, spread information, and make sure everyone is as safe as they can be.
Absolutely.
But with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.